Item C has my name on it, and I had asked our busing supervisor to address the board. Give you a little background. A few weeks ago I was on our website and just went to busing and noticed the number of routes that we weren't able to cover. It's kind of shocking to see that. So I contacted Roy to see what we could do as a board to assist in getting these routes up and going. And I'm going to tell you, when I hung the phone up after that conversation, I was better informed, unfortunately, as to the reasons that we're having difficulties covering all these routes. So at this time, I'd like to ask our busing supervisor to come up and address the board and the public.
I appreciate y'all having me and letting me speak a little bit about this. The situation is not that simple. It's something that does take a lot of time to get through different things. There's several different areas that probably hurt the fact of trying to get more bus drivers. The state requirement for the training of a bus driver is getting more lengthy. It's harder to abide by all the rules that need to happen for that to take place. A lot of the requirements that you have to do is very time consuming, and obviously it's an important area for that to be. I mean, it's important for that bus driver to know what to do, to know how to do it, but at the same time it's very difficult if you're trying to get through this process to get to be able to be a bus driver, and it takes months to literally go through it. And that's what it's starting to kind of get to. It is something that they have to go through training, they have to go through the hands-on, and you have to be able to get the hands-on testing scheduled. All of these things have been pushed back to where the length of time that it takes to get through them is much harder and longer than it used to be. We've even looked into making myself a third-party tester where we can certify our own drivers, and the state has suspended that to even be a possibility as of right now. They still do not let that happen. They still do not let a lot of the stuff that has to be scheduled, you have to physically call in, actually talk to a person. They're used to have, almost let you leave a message with your number and your email, and now they don't even require, they don't even ask that, they just say call back at a different time. And I mean, we have had the people, and this is me and everybody in the bus shop, and they will call, and we call that number all day, and all it does is put us on hold for usually 5 to 6 minutes, and then it will say everybody's busy, please call us back at a different time. And it has definitely made it difficult to acquire more drivers. Once we do get those drivers, a lot of the issues that we're having right now, a lot of people say, well, can we get more money to try to pay the drivers better? And I mean, I completely understand that, and more money will always let a driver tolerate a little bit more of a scenario that's going on. But we also have a lot of issues right now with the disciplinary side of the children on the buses. And I mean, there is, when I say that, the disrespect and the defiance that the children have is very, very shocking to what goes on right now. When you have a middle schooler that will stand up and tell a driver, and I mean, I have witnessed any scenario that I'm going to tell you right now, I have literally saw on video it physically happen. But when you have a middle schooler stand up and say, my dad pays your salary, I don't have to effing say sit anywhere you have me sit. I can sit wherever I want. When that type of mentality comes in, and that driver at that time has to determine, okay, I can push this and I can stop this bus, I can try to get them sit, or I can try to just, okay, I told you, this is where you need to sit, and I'll try to write you up tomorrow and see how this winds up playing out. And more, we have people, instead of, we have tried to put some monitors on the bus to give assistance to the drivers. Physically had a student tell that monitor, you're not the driver. I don't have to do anything you say. I can do whatever I want. And you don't even know my name because you ain't gonna be able to write me up no way, so it doesn't matter. And I mean, it is just repeatedly over and over. And you get to a point to where the drivers are, I can't do this. They will go and they will go through this whole process and get to, and 2 weeks into it, this is not going to be able to work. I mean, we put monitors on the bus, and even the monitors that are just trying to help those drivers and see what's going on, help with the problems. And even them, when they try to tell them, hey, you're cussing, we have elementary students on this bus, we can't have you. And they will stand up and just be like, I can effing say what I want. This is America, I got freedom of speech. And it is very different from anything, obviously, than anything I grew up with. I would have never even come close to speaking to an adult. And really, a lot of the children, it wouldn't matter if it was a police officer standing there versus an adult or somebody that works from the school. And we have had a lot of issues with the vaping skyrocketing.
On the buses.
Oh, yes. And I mean, we're talking, it's getting into elementary schools now, more and more. We've literally had to almost call the rescue squad when the bus pulls in at the school, because they are not even coherent as to what's going on. We have a neighboring county that is at a level to where they're getting ready to initiate a policy of keeping Narcan on the buses, to where in case there is an overdose, they will have something on the bus to help that as they're transporting those students, because they're seeing the same things we are. They're seeing, I mean, I literally saw a student that was in a parking lot throwing up, and the students that are on the bus are still smoking the vape that he used as he was throwing up, as he's off the, and I mean, they don't think to say what's in this. They don't ask. I mean, some of the vapes are very different than others. Some of them are nicotine, some of them are THC, and they affect the kids very differently. But all they know is somebody handed them something, so they took a hit on it. And I have literally seen a child completely pass out on a bus and fall back, and I mean, he busted his head hard enough to where I could hear it on the video. And he never flinched. And he was laying back there in that seat for about 12 minutes. And he started coming to. And I mean, nobody knew anything about it. If I hadn't been checking for another issue, I wouldn't even have known that it took place. And he literally passed out for about 12 minutes on the bus. And then by the time the bus got to the school, he was enough to where he walked in. I mean, and this is the stuff that the drivers are dealing with every day. And what can we do to, I mean, a lot of them, they don't realize, okay, do we want to just stop the bus? Call us, let us get an officer en route to them to try to figure out what's going on here, or try to make it to the school. And I mean, this is something they deal with all the time. And sometimes you got to try to determine, do I take a stand and say, okay, this is going to stop right now? I've had a driver call me and tell me, I need you to tell this person, I need you to tell their parents that they need to meet me at the sheriff's department. I'm not taking them home, I'm taking them to the police department. And I said, okay, have you roped them up? Well, I've been trying to deal with this. I've been trying to, and a lot of the drivers try to handle what's going on their bus themselves. They try to deal with it. And they said, I don't know where to go from here. And okay, but this can't be the answer the first time. Let's try to figure out what's going on here. Let's get you some help. Let's get the word out to the schools. The schools, I mean, they have people, they will, the principals, they'll come out, they'll ride with. I mean, obviously the kids are going to act very differently if I'm on the bus or what principals are on the bus. But even at that, we have seen, like with the monitors, what we'll do now, and sometimes what we're finding is you put a monitor on a bus for a good solid week, take them off the bus, and then go check the video for that day they took them off. And those kids will, now it's free reign, our monitor's not on, and I mean, I think right now, I hate to grade it in a scale of how many, but I mean, the most we found is 8 on a bus at one time. Almost every video that I check, vaping is happening somewhere on that bus. And we have had where it was about, I believe we spotted 3 separate vapes that were passed around by multiple kids, and there were 8 people in total. Just that one time I watched the video that were literally vaping on the bus.
Where is that vaping happening more in the mornings or in the afternoon?
It is typically the mornings. What they'll do is right before they get off to go into the school, and in the afternoons, as soon as they get on, most of the time before they even pull out of the parking.
So where is it doing today? On the person?
Sometimes it's on the person. I've seen them, I've gotten really good at searching where they put it. A lot of them are starting to put it down their pants, in their bras, anywhere that they think nobody's going to take the time or even try to check. They put it in their shoe.
Sometimes they'll stash it on the bus in the seat where they work, so that when they get back on the bus, they're Therefore, it's not at school, they don't get in trouble at school, but then they get on the bus, they go right back to that seat.
And we have had some drivers that started checking the edges of the seats in the back and finding them there. Yeah. They do, and I mean, and it's very, very quick. They're very good at it. If you're talking with them, even if a monitor is sitting right there, if that monitor looks away, all they need is about 2 seconds to keep an eye on what eyes are hitting them, and they put their hand and they put it down, and that's it. Amount of time to see what's going on. They have found that some of them that produce the actual smoke, if they hold their breath about 30 seconds, it absorbs into the tissue on the inside, and they don't even blow that smoke out. Now, what effects that has long term too, nobody knows. And I mean, right now they don't care. They're just trying to get away with what they're doing.
At what point are parents included or involved?
I mean,
you have them on video, correct?
Yeah, I mean, no, at that point, I mean, all the charges, everything goes into place. I mean, at that point, there's no, I mean, yes, there's possession, there's doing it. I mean, it doesn't matter. Everybody gets involved with that. But for the ones that are laying there waiting for an EMS, I mean, we're past the point of trying to, we were almost too late. I mean, by then, something's already going on, and we're trying to react to something that shouldn't have even happened to begin with.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
I don't know if it's, would you like to finish first or?
no, go ahead.
Okay, so I was an educator in high school, and it was a high school that some kids did have issues with disrespect, not in my classroom, but in general. And your bus situation sounds like the situation that some substitute teachers would face, with the complete and total lack of respect for an adult and an educator. And what we were talking about with the other teachers is that students have to have accountability and consequences.
Yes.
If they do something, they have to face immediate consequences. The more immediate, the better. And I'm not an expert. Maybe the director of schools would have some input on what type of consequences and accountability could be put into place for the students that regularly disrespect or regularly bring vapes.
Right.
But I feel we can do whatever we like. We could do positive reinforcement. We could do PDs. We could do anything. It does not work. If the person that is breaking the rules does not face accountability, consequences, nothing will work. So it's not about us. It's about having the proper consequences for the rule breakers. And I think maybe as a board and with the director of schools, with the educators, we just have to think of a way of having these consequences.
Well, no, and I mean, there is stuff in place, and there is protocol that goes with every bit of that. But at the same time, you also, if that child's not on that bus, you have, I'm going to throw, and I mean, this is not a number that I've done the math on by no means, but I'm going to say you have almost 60% of our child that are in our school that are being raised by grandparents instead of parents. And at that point, it is very difficult if they're not on a bus or they will not be at school.
What, and Ms. Gorlova, you bring up a very good point. The immediacy is absolutely supported by the school system. If we're brought into the loop on what's happening on the bus, there's immediate consequences. The problem is that the situations Roy's bringing up is 9 times out of 10 we're told about it later in the day, the next day, 2 days from then, and that's only if a student or another person on the bus lets us know. Because it can't be, we don't have live streaming video from the buses, it's all recorded, and it's recorded for a period of time and then it's overwritten. So unless we are told about some of these instances or it happens to be seen, we may find out days after the fact. So that immediacy, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's absolutely critical, and we do respond as quickly as possible. We do remove students from the bus. They are suspended, they are removed permanently. We have done a lot of that this year. But as Roy's talking about now, that then has bigger consequences down the road because we lose them. Because they're not with a parent, they're not with somebody that's holding them accountable, we then lose that student and access to that student, and they lose access to education. So on a lot of these situations, the reason I wholeheartedly supported Mr. Christian bringing Mr. Benavides up this evening is because we've got to start working and being creative in how we deal with some of these situations. Suspending students from school should be and is a last resort unless the action is egregious. These are egregious actions and we are suspending students. We have zero tolerance to every single student that has had drugs on the bus or at school. They are now in our alternative school system or they're not with us presently because of those actions. The other thing is that suspension when not accompanied by accountability in the home does nothing. It's simply a vacation day or days at home because they're sitting in their room playing video games or not supervised doing whatever. And that's something that's out of our control. I'm not here to talk about that, but I'm just explaining the process and the things that we're up against as far as barriers with this situation. We're going to face, and I know Roy's going to get to this, and I'm sorry to cut him off, but we're going to face 5 or 6 drivers that are going to retire for good from driving, possibly this year, and again as much the following year. We spent 6 months last year, Roy and his staff spent 6 months getting 3 qualified applicant drivers through the system with the state last year. 6 months.
Are these people paid during that process?
We try to bring them on. We try to bring them on as early as we can. We have them ride routes with the other drivers. We have them be monitors, but they're not paid as drivers until they're qualified to.
But they're paid as monitors, or
can be. Yes, can be. We try to get them on the hook and paid as soon as possible because if we string them along and the state's not working with us, and that's a delayed process, they're not going to stick with us. So we've tried to be creative on that front. I want to thank the board for monitors because we've got 24-ish monitors in there now, and that is helping is if the monitor's consistent. Here's the flip side of this issue. We're talking about the very minor number of students that act this way, but it only takes 1 per route, 1 per 2 or 3 routes for that route to become unsafe. The situations where a driver is being confronted by a student or a monitor is being confronted by a student and a mother gets on the phone with that, on the student's phone and says, wait till you come to my stop, I'm going to be waiting for you. We've had to have SROs and police officers escort our buses to drop students off because the parents are threatening our monitors because they're trying to tell our students to turn their phones down because it's got cursing on it and other things that aren't appropriate for our elementary kids to hear on the bus, nor anybody on the bus. And for that accountability not to be there in the home, we're fighting a losing battle. So we've got some creative solutions. I've taught some questions for our Mr. McCarty on the educational law side that we're working on. But I wanted to take this opportunity, and Roy did as well when Chris started asking. I wanted to take the opportunity to let you know why I asked for monitors earlier this year, why we felt the need to be a little bit more proactive instead of reacting and suspending students from the bus, kicking them off the bus, suspending them from school, and not having another plan in place. And I want to say this publicly, if we can't fill routes, and we don't provide, and we can't recruit subs, we are going to have to drastically amend our current transportation system to the point, and maybe including not being able to run buses. That's the dire need of this situation. We're not only going to not be able to keep the drivers we have when they retire, We're not gonna have anybody in the wings to say, I'm gonna drive and put up with that type of behavior on the Hawkins County buses. And guess what? It's not just Hawkins County buses. The school system that Roy spoke with this afternoon, I speak with the other directors, he speaks with the transportation supervisors and other systems. We're all dealing with the same thing, in some cases worse. But I wanted to take the opportunity that we're trying to think outside the box and solve this solution creatively, but I also wanted you to know the barriers we're up against.
So is it maybe not time to revisit outsourcing and going to a third-party provider?
Here's the thing with outsourcing, those that are outsourcing right now can't find enough drivers either. The
But-
contractors that are running in other systems around us have more vacancies than we do.
So what do they do when they don't have drivers?
They don't fill the routes. Same thing we're doing. They don't have subs, they don't
This
fill
is
the routes.
Yeah,
Sure, but,
very much so.
you know, I don't think,
Some
we're
of the-
looking at it necessarily, I mean,
Some of the possible solutions, just so that you guys can be thinking of some of this as we go into budget season, Roy and I have talked about splitting up middle school, high school as one group and elementary, running 2 routes and keeping the students separate so that when they're more manageable and some of the actions, if we're dealing with egregious actions on behalf of middle schoolers or high schoolers, at least they're not affecting the elementary students. That's one thing that we're looking at. That would require doubling up of our routes. Not in every situation, there may be some reductions in there if we're taking some high schoolers and there's not necessarily elementary students in the same area. But we've been thinking about that. We've thought about central drop-off and pickup points, where parents may have to bring them to a pickup center in each region of our county, and we can reduce the number of buses that have to go into door-to-door pickups. None of that stuff is favorable. None of that helps our students out. None of those help our families out. We don't want to go down that road. But if we're in a situation where we can't find the drivers and we can't staff the positions, we need to start looking at some other solutions. And the other thing is we need to think of creative ways to hold students and parents accountable for some of the actions that are resulting in unsafe transportation for the rest of the students on those buses. It's unfair to the 90%, 95% of the students that are following the rules, that are obeying what the drivers state and what the rules are being supported by our monitors, when 1 or 2 students fail to do those things and put everybody else at risk.
Can I ask a question? How, from the point of legal, how legal is it to just kick a student off the bus route and just say, sorry, parents, you have to take the kid to school? Is that legal?
Yes, it is legal, and we have done that probably to the tune of hundreds of times this year already.
No, permanently.
Yes,
Like just
Yeah.
permanently.
permanently.
Because if you're saying it's 1 or 2 kids per bus route, then maybe it's worth it to, as mean as that sounds, sacrifice those kids coming to school regularly, but
We-
just have the other kids be in a safe environment.
We have done that. We've done that time and time again and again. When we see the egregious behavior, we deal with the egregious behavior, and those students are removed permanently. When you consider that we have 91 routes, and 5 to 6% of the students are acting out, that's quite a few students.
That's a lot.
And we have to be able to identify that behavior or be told about it before we can react. And again, that's another one of those barriers we're up against. But creative, on the positive side, we've got a lot of creative things that we're working on. But I did want to take the opportunity with Roy coming up to let you know what we're up against. And parents calling and saying, we pay transportation taxes, you can't kick my student off the bus. That is absolutely untrue, and I have backed Roy 100%, and I will back our principals 100%. When they feel the need to remove a student from the bus, it is 100% the parent's responsibility to get that child to school, period. I will also say on record, if a bus monitor or other adult, including but not limited to the driver, tells a student to do something and they refuse, that is disobedience, defiance, and it's the same rule breaking that occurs at school, and the same consequences will occur. And if the driver has to call Roy and tell Roy that a student needs to be removed from the bus, I will back that 100% no matter what the parent says. We're at the point where we cannot tolerate this type of behavior, and we have told the drivers in the last several days, anything and everything that results in an unsafe route needs to be reported to Roy immediately so we can deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, we have very rural roads, and there is a lot of times where they will not get cell phone coverage. They will not get us to be able to talk to them on radio. They are literally a mobile community themselves driving. And that driver has to deal with whatever happens, no matter what, at that time. Period. There's no other way to do it. So that is a very difficult situation to put someone in a lot.
Well, and board, this is a dire situation. There's no real easy answer to put out there. Well, yeah, behind the barn, you know, we'll take care of these. But in today's society, we can't do that. Roy, I want to thank you for bringing this information to this board and to the public so they'll have a better understanding of the children that do behave and do what they're supposed to do. And we lose a driver to a certain route, and that child does not have the right to ride a bus because of the actions of the few. That's not fair. That's not fair at all.
And it is
And it's
very
not up to
quickly,
us.
I mean, even people outside of our area, our region, our county, know where the problem areas are. And even ones that we've had come in, and I'll be a new driver, and I want to transition to where you're at, but I don't want to drive here.
Right.
Or I don't want to drive here.
Well,
And I mean, they talk amongst themselves and they know just as much. And that's where it's very hard sometimes to bring someone in and get them where we want them and try to make, and I mean, I do everything I can to make sure that my drivers know that I'm behind them 100%.
and that's evident. But we could continue this till morning.
Oh yeah.
We really could. And I'm going to sum it up this way. Busing is not a right. It's a privilege. That's state law. Riding a bus for a student is an extension of the classroom. They better start behaving themselves. Consequences? Yes, I agree. Immediate consequences for disciplinary actions have to be put in place. This is not a Hawkins County problem. It's a nationwide problem. Research it a little bit. Roy, thank you.
Thank you.
And we will be looking into solutions, but they're going to come swift. Because we can't let a select few ruin it for everybody else.
Amen.
So we'll leave it at that. Any comments before we move on? We're going to take up the resolution that was presented by Mr. Boyd.
I just want my drivers to know I love every one of them, and I thank them every day
I believe
for
that.
everything they do.
I believe that. Thank you, sir.
Everything.